Hello there, welcome to the video. In the last couple of weeks I've been looking at a few videos from the vinyl community and amongst everything else. And one of the kind of regular things that are popping up are what's called Rob Walker's Vinyl Tag 2023. Now, one of the vinyl community members, Rob Walker, has put together a list of, I think it's 20 questions. If you're watching, Rob, it's a bit too many, but I'm going to try and do my best to go through all of them. So 20 questions about kind of our experience of music in 2023. So without further ado, I'm just going to go through the list. And I've got a pile of stuff here to display. Right, the first question is, or the first requirement is your favorite new release of 2022. Now, an admission. I don't listen to, these days, I don't listen to music radio. I don't stream. If I see something new, I'll probably catch it on YouTube. Most of the time, what I'm doing, over the years, I've been building up my vinyl and CD collections. And ever since the early 70s, I've been stretching out into other genres and subgenres and so on. And now, for example, I'm a big fan of classical music, and I've got a huge collection of that. And over the past 30 years, I've been dipping in and out of jazz, and that collection has continued to grow as well. So I tend to find what I'm doing is, rather than looking at the latest releases, I'm filling in the gaps in my music library with stuff that I kind of missed first time around. So in answering the question of the favorite album of 2022, I had to go online and look at a few lists of the top 20, top 50, top 100 albums of 2022. And I'll openly admit that almost all of them were unrecognizable. I'd never heard them. I didn't know who the artist was. I'm so out of touch. And also, I don't read the music magazines anyway, so either. So I stopped doing that a few years ago. So I don't get these prompts to investigate certain artists a little bit further. But I did buy a small number of albums last year. The first one I'll just show before I get to my favourite is Elvis Costello and the Imposters, The Boy Named If. Bought that in the autumn, haven't listened to it. Sorry, Elvis fans. This one I bought kind of reluctantly. Bruce Springsteen's Only the Strong Survive. But I heard a few tracks on YouTube. I've kind of gone off Bruce a little bit in the last few years, and I thought an album of covers, I thought it was going to be the Great American Songbook like Rod Stewart or Bob Dylan, and I like both of those, but they seemed really perfunctory. You know, it was just kind of going through the motions, and you know, Bob Dylan demonstrated that he still had a decent voice. You know, he could hold his notes and so on. But it never felt authentic to me, and even though I've got the Bob Dylan albums, they're not that brilliant. And I was delighted to hear that Springsteen wasn't going to try and do the Great American Songbook or, like Rod Stewart, cover rock classics. But he went back to soul. And those of us who've been following Springsteen for a very long time will know that he's got a deep, long-standing interest in soul music of the 60s, and clearly from this one into the 70s and into the 80s as well. Does a really good job. It's kind of, I'm loath to say it's easy listening. It's a bit slick, it's updated sound, but it's still kind of, it's got that spare Stax, Motown, Atlantic type sound. His voice has got a similar rasp to Otis Redding, but he's no Otis Redding, obviously. But he sounds like he's really enjoying himself, and his vocals are far better than on his more recent albums. But my favourite album of 2022 is this one, Johnny Marr, Fever Dreams Parts 1 to 4. Double album. Yeah, nice cover. Not really been, you know, I've got all the Smith stuff, but I've never been a real fan. I saw them once in the 1980s when they were part of the Red Wedge tour, which was in support of the unions in the UK. And they came on and did a blistering 20-minute set at Newcastle City Hall, and it was absolutely blew everybody else away. They were fantastic. But I've not really followed them that intensively. I'm not a huge fan of Morrissey, even though I've got quite a few of his albums. And Johnny Marr just popped up on YouTube, and what I found was that this guy's got a pretty good voice, and his band is pretty good. And so you kind of wonder, what has he been doing for the last 30 years? I haven't the foggiest idea, but this is really good. It kind of has it's reminiscent of the more smoother sounding tracks from the Smiths catalogue, but it's really good. It's really, really listenable. Yeah, I definitely recommend that one. And it's a double vinyl. I paid less than 20 quid for it, so I'm quite happy with that purchase. So, the last band, question 2, the last band or solo artist you saw live. I saw Deep Purple in Birmingham. A friend of mine wanted to go, and I've only seen them once before, and that was not that long ago, and they were pretty good. And I'm holding up Made in Japan from 1972, basically because most of the set on this latest and last gig I'm likely to see by them, they were playing in 1972 as well. So few newer tracks, but most of it was from Made in Japan. So that was the last band I saw. Question 3, their first album was the best. Is this one, King Crimson. Now those Crimson fans, like me, know that they've gone through loads of different phases, and as a live band, they were still brilliant until I believe they just stopped last year, decided to stop. Various incarnations, many excellent albums, but this one is just genre defining. Fantastic. It opens with 21st Century Schizoid Man, which is kind of heavy metal track but in a prog vein. I Talk to the Wind is like a kind of a ballad. It's quite beautiful. Then it's got the dramatic, stunning epitaph with brilliant vocals by Greg Lake. And then there's Moonchild, and then In the Court of the Crimson King, which is the title track, closes off the album. Absolutely fantastic album. Sure, it sounds like 1970 or 1969, but it is the best album that they ever did, no question about it. Question number 4, a hat trick of the show, hat trick show, the vinyl, CD, cassette of an album. Here's the cassette. Here's the CD. And here's the album. Jackson Browne, Running on Empty. Combination of live tracks and tracks recorded on the tour bus and backstage at sound checks and so on. And I remember I saw Jackson Browne on I think what he called his acoustic tour 10, 15 years ago now at Birmingham Symphony Hall. And he was stunning, absolutely fantastic. But he asked for requests, and when me and a friend were about half a dozen rows from the front, and so I kind of, piped up, not too loud, and asked for the Loadout, which closes the album. It goes into Stay at the very end. Loadout, fantastic piano-based track that is about breaking down the stage gear and everything, and what they call the loadout at the end of a concert, and kind of honouring the road crew and all the work that they do. Anyway, Jackson replied. He said, I can't do that because I haven't got my band. And so I persisted. I said, come on, you got to do it. It's great. Just the piano version will do. And I think at that point, and he kind of said no. And I think at that point, my mate put his hand on my forearm and said, back off before you embarrass the pair of us. But anyway, Jackson Browne, fantastic. An album that starts and ends with the same letter. I've never heard this word before, and I've never heard this word before. Hang on a second, just hang on. Still going? Yeah, it's still going. Yeah. All right. Sorry, I was just checking the camera there. So I've never heard this word before or since used, but this is Tom Waits and Swordfish Trombones. Now this album, I think, was released in about 1980 or something. 1983 on Ireland. This was a real transitional album. He'd gone from the barstool balladeer of the early 70s stuff, which is absolutely fantastic, where he's kind of got this kind of gritty, croony type voice, and here he starts using percussion, unusual percussion sounds, and his voice, he starts experimenting with his voice and starts to go a lot deeper. There's still some beautiful ballads on this album. It's a great album. Not my favourite Tom Waits album, but a fantastic artist nevertheless. Right. Someone born the same year as me, or as you. Suzanne Vega. Second album, Solitude Standing, has the unforgettable Tom's Diner, Luca, and the amazing, gorgeous Solitude Standing title track. Great album. Never seen her, but great artist. Hasn't got like the broadest range in terms of a singing voice, but is very, very distinctive, very addictive, really good. So that's Suzanne Vega. Most listened to album in 2022 is Couldn't Stand the Weather by Stevie Ray Vaughan. And this is mostly because, you know, when you listen to music and you've spent a bit of money on your hi-fi setup, I think what you're trying to do is you're trying to use your listening space and the hi-fi equipment in it, and indeed the source material, the pressing in the case of vinyl. You're trying to trick your brain, I think, into replicating what it would feel like if you were in the presence of the artist performing the songs. So you hear often when hi-fi enthusiasts talk about the sound stage and the depth from front to back, so you can kind of you can mentally visualize where the drum kit is or where the bass guitar is, and you know, the voice normally front and center, but you can kind of get this illusion of a three-dimensional space. And one of the reasons why I keep going back to this album is side 2, where you've got the Tin Pan Alley, or also known as the roughest place in town. Has this it's a really slow blues. It lasts the best part of 10 minutes. It's got amazing presence when you sit there and concentrate on it. I absolutely love it. So I keep going back to that just to try and get that sense of what it's like with the lights down low, volume turned up loud, and you can just imagine yourself sitting in the studio with the band in front of you playing that song. So yeah, that's my most played album of 2022. My most listened to artist in 2022 is Peter Hamill, lead singer of Van der Graaf Generator. He's been going for 50 years as an artist. Not sure what he's doing quite now, because I think he took ill in May last year. Still around though, I understand. And this is not his best album. This is PH7 from, I think, about 1979 or something. And it's not his best album. If you want to find out what his best album is, you have to watch my video of a rundown of the very best albums from Peter Hamill. But he is the artist I continue to listen to regularly. An Australian artist or band, Nick Cave. Now, Nick Cave, I knew a little bit about Nick Cave in the 80s, but I never really followed him. It wasn't kind of my thing. And then he did the album A Boatman's Call, and so I re-entered the Nick Cave world, like a lot of people, with The Boatman's Call, and then the follow-up album No More Shall We Part, and I've bought everything ever since and gone back and pretty much bought everything from his catalogue, his back catalogue as well. I love this particular album. It's a little bit unheralded, but it's got some just amazing tracks on it. Water's Edge, Jubilee Street, Higgs Boson Blues, and the title track, Push the Sky Away, is absolutely gorgeous. And he's working with Warren Ellis, who does violin and such like, and sound effects and keyboards, and he plays this absolutely glorious keyboard refrain on the title track of this album, and it only lasts, I think, about 4 minutes. 4 minutes and 8 seconds, but quite frankly, you could play that for 20 minutes and it wouldn't get boring. It's absolutely gorgeous. Highly recommended. That's Nick Cave. That's my Australian thing. Record people would be surprised you purchased in 2022. I'm not sure if anyone's going to be surprised, but I bought the ABBA album Voyage. It's kind of a slightly sad because you can hear the voices haven't got the strength that they had when they were young, but this is far too good. It doesn't, after all this time they produced an album as good as this. It's amazing. It's really, really good. So I really enjoy this album. I particularly like, don't take this the wrong way, you can't be sure these days, I Can Be That Woman is superb, absolutely superb. But the album is really good. It doesn't deserve to be as good, but it is. It's great. An artist or a band you're complete on, there's about 3 artists I'm definitely complete on, maybe 4. But this is the one I've selected, Van Morrison. I think I've got everything by Van Morrison, almost everything on vinyl. If I haven't got it on vinyl, I've definitely got it on CD. This is a live version from the Hollywood Bowl of the Astral Weeks concert, with a couple of tracks added on side 4. Yeah, good album, really good. Quite hard to find, I think, these days as well, particularly on vinyl. That's a great run of 3 albums. Well, I talked before about King Crimson creating the genre-defining album in The Court of the Crimson King. But these are 3 albums that also cemented that genre. And they're by Genesis. There's Nursery Crime, which has the amazing musical box on it, amongst other great tracks like The Fountain of Salmacis and The Return of the Giant Hogweed. Glorious cover as well. This is the kind of the latest reissue. I've got almost dozens of copies of these. So that's Nursery Crime, album number 1. Album number 2, what followed it up, was Foxtrot, which has Watch of the Skies, Get 'Em Out by Friday, and the epic Supper's Ready. Again, stunning album, really good. And then during this phase, those are 71, 72 respectively, and in 73 they were say during this they came selling England by the pound. So during this phase they were getting ever more polished, not poppy, still very, very experimental, but the sound was getting more polished and they were becoming ever more competent musicians. This is arguably the greatest progressive rock album of all time. If it's not number 1, it's definitely in the top 3 or 4. But it's got the amazing Firth the Fifth with the best guitar solo in rock music, in my opinion, from Steve Hackett. Starts with Dancing in the Moonlit Night. It's got the hits I Know What I Like, In Your Wardrobe, Battle of Ebbing Forest, Cinema Shore, and so on. Great album. Great album. Great run of 3 classic albums. And it's defined Genesis's legacy. When anyone thinks and tries to define who are Genesis, what do they do, people home in on those 3 albums. All these years later, the early 70s, even though they became stadium rock gods, still those 3 albums mean the most. A soundtrack, an 80s soundtrack, The Snowman. I could have chosen loads. I was looking for my vinyl copy of the Twin Peaks soundtrack, but I think that's 1990, so it probably doesn't count. But this is 1983, The Snowman. I don't know if anyone has seen this, if you've seen The Snowman, but it's an animated film. It's always shown on TV ahead of Christmas. Great story, beautifully orchestrated as well, and it's got a great classic song, Walking in the Air. It's lovely. It really is a great soundtrack. It's not your usual soundtrack stuff. Right, question number 14. So we're two-thirds of the way through here. Stick with me. We lost them in 2022. The great Wilko Johnson. Poor Wilko. He got a 10-year reprieve after a diagnosis of pancreatic cancer, and he had an unlikely operation to save him. But just a wonderful guitarist, a very, very intelligent man. There's a couple of documentaries that you can watch on YouTube where he's talking at length. He is, he was a wise man, and as far as I can tell, a lovely character. But I'm sure he was as hard as nails as well, being down from Canvey Island, east of London. But this has got some fantastic tracks. This is just the best of that came out fairly recently. I didn't see him with Dr. Feelgood, who's the guitarist in Dr. Feelgood, but his first solo tour where he created a band called the Solid Senders, I was there, and I've seen him a few times since. But these some tracks here worth mentioning. Back in the Night, Dr. Dupree is great. Roxette from the Dr. Feelgood canon. Sneaking Suspicion, again, she does it right. Back in the Night, did I mention that again? Yeah, Back in the Night, yeah, it's a live version on side 4. Yeah, sadly Wilko finally left us, but what a good guy, what a good guy. The most disappointing purchase of 2022, this one, Animals by Pink Floyd, the reissue. Sounds amazing, probably best on CD. The pressing on these vinyl issues is terrible. So it's got some pretty awful and intrusive surface noise. And I think it's been a bit of a scandal. It surely must have been a scandal in the Pink Floyd camp, because there's no way that this should have come out of the pressing plant in the state that it did. But a beautiful sounding album, heartily recommended, but yeah, disappointing. Played it a couple of times and thinking, oh, I'll just play the CD. Never mind. I found a grail. Right, well, you must have had artists where you bought a couple of albums or an album at one time and you thought, well, it doesn't quite do it for me. And so you leave that artist behind, and then 20 years later, an album comes out and you read a good review in a music mag, and then you think, well, I'll try that one. And you do, and you think, wow, what a great, great album. Well, it was the case of this man here for me. I bought a couple of albums in the 1970s, and then he released an album called Bad Love, and I always wanted to get Bad Love. Let's see if I can pull out the Bad Love so you know which one I'm talking about. Here we go. Bad Love. Now, this one was released, when was this one? 1999. Fantastic album, absolutely fantastic, just as clever and acerbic as ever, but great tracks. My Country opens it. Every Time It Rains is a great ballad. The Great Nations of Europe is a real dig at how the Europeans around the globe back in the day messed with the world. Also one about Karl Marx saying the world isn't fair, which is really clever as well. And a lovely track to his ex-wife called I Miss You. It's really good. And I've wanted to find this on vinyl for years, and it was never released until this box set showed up, apparently in 2021 on Record Store Day, and I missed it completely, but I found it towards the end of last year. And I'm absolutely delighted with this box set. Fantastic. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 albums. Great, great stuff. Oops. There we go. Near the end, space-themed album sleeve or song, Eno's Apollo. My favourite Brian Eno album. So not his pop, it's kind of ambient stuff. Soundtrack to a movie. What was the film called? I can't remember what the film was called. Anyway, this is a reissue which he adds a whole album's worth of other tunes, soundscapes that kind of are in keeping with the original release. It's done with Roger Eno but importantly Daniel Lanois, who I'd never really heard of back in the day, but he put some great sounds on this album as well. It's beautiful, and the track An Ending brackets Ascent is utterly gorgeous, fantastic. And finally, show an album released in 1973. Oh, hang on a second. Oh yeah, non-vinyl purchase. I missed that one. Sorry, Rob. Non-vinyl purchase was a box set of, goodness knows, 34 CDs. 34 CDs by Camille Saint-Saëns. Saint-Saëns responsible for my favourite piece of classical music, which is his Third Symphony. But this is just incredible, and hardly anything else gets released or gets played apart from Carnival of the Animals and a couple of other pieces like Dance Macabre and Samson and Delilah. But this is, you really can see that he's, the style of music that was in the Third Symphony, which is utterly gorgeous. It ran through much of his work, so I'm still discovering that. 34 CDs, I'm about a third of the way through, but from what I've heard so far, it's gorgeous. Show some a present from the vinyl community or something else. Well, saw an old friend of mine for the first time in a while in early December, and he came up to the house and brought with him for me Stevie Van Zandt's autobiography, Little Steven, Unrequited Infatuations. Little Steven, or Stevie's autobiography, I'm about 2/3 of the way through it. Obviously his early stuff in Asbury Park, Jersey, New York, and his association with Springsteen, and his work in the political sphere as well. Now I love Sun City, the album, and his campaign to eventually get Nelson Mandela released. It's great. I find a lot of his political views a little bit, if you pardon the pun, a bit black and white, a little bit oversimplified. He kind of takes sides very easily, and he's not so nuanced as I'd like my political campaigners to be. But he's a bit too sure of himself, I think, as well. So, but you know, it's great, it's entertaining, it's well written, it's funny too. So that's really good. And finally, Rob, if you're still there, I'm still here too. An album from 1973. Well, I've already shown Genesis selling by the pound, but arguably the best album of 1973, I say arguably, is this one, Quadrophenia by The Who. Their rock opera based upon the battles between the mods and the rockers on Brighton Beach. Yeah, fantastic album. My favourite Who album. And I did see them do a version of this at Wembley Arena about 20 or 30 years ago. But yeah, fantastic, great stuff. Quadrophenia. Right, so that's it. That's the Vinyl Tag 2023. Thanks for watching. I don't know how long this video has been going on, probably too long. But I appreciate those of you who've hung around till the end. Right, so thanks for watching, and I'll see you on the next video. Cheers for now. Bye.